It is said that radio was killed by TV. TV was killed by the internet. The exaggeration on the death of TV makes great headlines, but it does not reflect the real situation. SABC recently retrenched 600 employees while receiving billions from the state. So, how did it find itself in this mess? The South African Broadcasting Corporation, short known as the SABC, is the largest broadcasting company in the Southern African region, second to MultiChoice. It provides 19 radio stations and 3 TV channels free of charge to the public, with one 24-hour news channel available through a paid service from MultiChoice DSTV. Hi, SK here. In today's episode, we take a deeper dive into the history of SABC, how the company was established, the introduction of TV and radio in South Africa, and the Afrikaner broader bond control of media and censorship. Before we get into this, did you subscribe already? Because that would be super fantastic. Before the establishment of radio, wireless communication was only considered in the context of aeroplanes, airships, maritime activities by the state. In 1919, 2 radio hobbyists in Cape Town, John Samuels and Reginald Hopkins, started experimenting with broadcasting, playing gramophones records to each other, and techno junkies started joining in through crystal sets. The crystal sets did not require any electrical power to pick up the radio signal. The most popular radio hobbyist was Toby Irons in Johannesburg, and by the end of 1920, ordinary people were now part of the audience listening through crystal sets. They would tune in to listen to music playing and jokes made by Toby and friends. It was plainly done out of the fun of it. The spread of radio continued until 1922, when John Roberts, a radio hobbyist and city engineer in Durban, saw the importance of using wireless technology in the municipality for local broadcast. He approached the Postmaster General in Pretoria for a broadcasting license, but that was delayed for 2 years. On the other hand, the Postmaster General felt that the wireless amateurs, the likes of Toby, had to be controlled, and in 1923, government began regulating the broadcasting service, requesting a license fee from anyone that wished to broadcast. They placed stricter control over who could obtain a transmitter and who could own a radio receiver. The first official radio station was formed by the South African Railway in Johannesburg in 1923, which was later taken over by the Scientific and Technical Club. 1924, the Cape Peninsula Broadcasting Association also formed a station, followed by the Durban Corporation on the same year. Now, there were 3 official stations in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban. Due to financial difficulties to run the station, the African Broadcasting Company, known as ABC, was formed in 1927, incorporating all 3 stations under one umbrella. The financial difficulties continued under ABC, and as a result, the government invited a broadcasting expert from the British Broadcasting Corporation, Sir John Reith. John advised the government to establish a state-owned broadcasting company. Later on, SABC was established in 1936, and the first radio station would broadcast both in English and Afrikaans, which was previously not done by the other stations. SABC took over ABC, assets and staff. Some sources claim that the introduction of a state-owned broadcasting was aimed at controlling access to information about South Africa's involvement in World War II. From 1936, SABC formed SAFM to focus on English content and RSG-FM in 1937 for Afrikaans content. Moving from this, radio stations broadcasted selective information relating to subversive activities happening in the country at that time. The inclusion of African languages called the Bantu languages, specifically isiZulu, started in 1942 with Charles Mpanza and Herbert Lomo. The Bantu broadcasts were only done for 30 minutes, divided into news, music, and any topic of some sort. Scripts had to be translated into English first for approval from the head of the Bantu broadcasting services. All over the country, black people listened to radio through white landline loudspeakers placed in public areas. Their houses had no electricity, and battery-run wireless radio machines were too expensive. To add to that, there was an annual license fee to pay for wireless radio. The landline was restricted to specific places such as the compounds, hostels, and townships. It allowed SABC to control broadcast information to specific ethnic groups selective to their location. In 1948, after the victory of the National Party, government officials gained control of SABC and would introduce more Afrikaans content, dropping the practice of carrying BBC News on SABC platforms. 2 years later, SABC introduced Springbok Radio as a commercial bilingual station to sustain finances. On the other hand, the company built facilities to be used by agencies and advertisers, more like how you would rent someone's studio to record high-quality content using his or her own studio equipment and engineers. In fact, SABC was the first broadcasting company to build its own studio equipment due to the effects of World War II, which made it difficult to procure studio equipment abroad. Going on, the company launched a radio station meant for black people, the Bantu Radio. The Bantu Radio was available in isiXhosa, Sesotho, and isiZulu. In 1961, remarkable changes took place as other languages were added. This gave birth to Radio Zulu, now known as Ukhozi, Lesedi, Umhlobo Wenene, Motsweding, Phalaphala, and more. Following this, SABC would diversify their portfolio to reach different markets with the establishment of Highfield FM, now known as 947 Stereo FM in 1964, Good Hope in 1965, and East Coast in 1967. Springbok Radio ceased production in 1985 after losing its audience to 5FM and competition from TV. Springbok was a success for SABC. It generated millions for the company. Metro FM was launched in 1986, aimed at the black middle class who were elite and more sophisticated. Interesting fact, 5FM was the first FM stereo station in South Africa. Stereo FMs offered a more richer sound as compared to mono FMs. The story about SA television was heavily influenced by the politics of the National Party and the Afrikaner Broederbond organization. We firstly need to examine what the Afrikaner Broederbond or Afrikaner Brother organization was. Established in 1918, this organization was a male-dominated group focused on the advancement of Afrikaner interest. It aimed to maintain a separate, pure, white Afrikaans nation, turn English-speaking into white Afrikaans-speaking people, and maintain a white South African nation based on the Afrikaner principle. This organization held back the introduction of TV in South Africa. So, back to TV. The first attempt to introduce TV was in 1953 and was declined. The second attempt was from a company under the leadership of Harry Oppenheimer in 1964. It was only after 1969 when South Africa missed the televised moonwalk by Neil Armstrong. Government was pressurized by the public to make recommendations about a national television system for the country. In an effort to neutralize the public frustrations, a 15-minute footage of the moon landing was arranged and shown to the public with limitations. Dr. Albert Hersdorf, Minister of Post and Telegraph, was quoted saying, "Over my dead body," denouncing TV as a miniature bioscope over which parents would have no control over. He further stated that South Africa would have to import films showing race mixing, and advertising would make Africans dissatisfied with their lot. Many white people had a different reaction towards his views, found them irrational because it was nonsensical why Rhodesia, now called Zimbabwe, was able to introduce television in 1961, though less economical than South Africa. December of 1969, a commission of inquiry was set up to look into the practicality of TV and was decided that it was possible only if it would operate from the National Party's view to avoid negative features such as idea of race, communism, news about the involvement of war, and conditions in the country. 1974, 2 years before the launch of TV, a board that would look into TV was appointed, but then lied a huge problem ahead of them. None of the managers had seen TV before. Unlike how things are done today with outsourcing government work, these managers were sent overseas to study television. The managers were stationed at a London hotel called the Gore Hotel, where they'd spend 10 hours every day locked up in a room studying how television is done. They did the same in Germany, France, and returned to South Africa to implement the ideas. It is important to note that the early implementation of TV was heavily influenced by the British style of broadcasting. Same as the establishment of radio, there were no black trainees in the first phase of TV, and this frustrated the creativity of producers. There was a limitation on what producers could do. Robin Knox was the only English-speaking person in the hierarchy of a SABC board. The management team had a task to achieve, and that was to educate, inform, entertain the public without appearing as humiliating the policies under the apartheid regime. By this, you can imagine the nightmare news editors were subjected to. Despite everything, the National Party never mandated any of the producers on the do's and don'ts. They were told to show both sides of the story. However, this created a grey area. All programs had to undergo censorship and a lot of items were cut out. By 1976, South Africa saw the complete rollout of national TV. Unlike other nations that began on black and white, South Africa used a PAL system, which was a color system for TV. The first channel broadcasted in English and Afrikaans only. Most of the programming came from the United States that were dubbed in Afrikaans and other indigenous languages. After the 1976 Soweto uprising, SABC would play films displaying the opposite of what was happening. They played programs of black people receiving the best education and cut out all the negativity. Furthermore, a producer by the name of Kevin Harris was tasked with producing a 1-hour documentary special on Baragana Hospital, a hospital based in the south of Johannesburg, Soweto. The aim of the documentary was to show what the NP government was doing for blacks. Unfortunately, the documentary featured content such as the living conditions in Soweto and somehow got approved by the management without edits. Upon airing the documentary with influence outside SABC, the producer was fired in 24 hours.
To have it screened. Management viewed the film, and there was a lot of debate within management as to whether the film should go out or not. But that aside, the SABC management passed that film without cuts in its entirety.
1981, 2 services are introduced, TV2 for isiZulu and isiXhosa and TV3 for Sesotho and Setswana. TV1 would continue with English and Afrikaans. TV4 followed in 1986, carrying sports and entertainment. SABC finally lost the monopoly of TV in 1986 with the introduction of Mnet, a subscription-based service funded by Naspers. Mnet used satellite decoders manufactured locally by Panasonic. The Broadcasting Authority granted them a 1-hour time slot each day under TV4 to promote itself. In 1988, they started an independent investigative TV series called Cut Blanche that still airs today. The show uncovered most famous scandals of human rights abuse, corruption, and consumer affairs. SABC operated outside South Africa, in Namibia, Lesotho, Botswana, Eswatini, and the rest of Africa via satellite. Post the apartheid era, which ended in 1994, SABC appointed its first black executive officer, Zwelakhe Sisulu. As a respectable journalist, he was tasked with transforming SABC, and as years went by, this would later on work out differently. This brings me to the end of this episode. In the next episode, we're going to detail on the fall of SABC, how it lost competition, appointing inexperienced board members without training, competition from private radio stations, multi-choice, Netflix, streaming services, more failure that led to an astonishing 3.5 billion bailout from the state, and a catastrophic financial disaster that led to the retrenchment of 600 employees. That's been it from me, Sebolelokhanyela. Please sub and leave a comment below on what you see as the future of SABC. Cheers.